Hello and welcome to the FSAI Breakfast Bite on what to expect from your inspector. Today I'm joined by Devenish, an Environmental Health Officer with the HSE. Today he's going to talk to us about the who, what and why of a food business inspection. Today's event will last 40 minutes, so there will be a 30-minute presentation followed by a 10-minute Q&A. So please do get your questions into us. You can drop them into the questions box and I will put them to Philip in the ins. So without further ado, I'll pass you over to Philip. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, good morning, everyone. As Elaine said, my name is Philip. I work for the HSE, and they've been asked me to do a little piece for you about what to expect from your inspector. So, when an inspector calls, so as I said, I work for the HSE, and when an inspector calls, the common perception is it's bad news. The inspector's going to find rats or find cockroaches, or going to bury you with paperwork, or there's going to be an enforcement. And as the headline there from the FSAI says, 8 closure orders served on food businesses in February. So that's the perception. When an inspector calls, it's bad news. So I'm going to help or try to allay the myth there and try and give you some information about what actually happens when someone like me walks through your door. And that is a picture of me. Many years ago, that was an article done in the Irish Independent. So firstly, let me introduce myself. So my name is Philip Devenish. I'm an Environmental Health Officer. I work in Dublin North Inner City. As some of you can tell from my wonderful accent, I'm an Englishman, trained in Birmingham, worked in London, moved to Dublin, and I've been working over here in environmental health, mainly in Dublin Inner City, for about 18 years now. So I'm not quite as young as I was in that picture. So here's what we're going to look at today. I'm going to talk about the who, why, and when of an inspection. I'm going to talk about what, or give you some hints about what we're looking at. I'm going to tell you how we convert what happens during an inspection into an inspection outcome. And then I'm going to talk about how that inspection outcome turns into follow-up action. That's what we do after the inspection. I'm going to give you some do's and don'ts. But before we get cracking on that, tell me about your businesses. I think we've got a poll coming now. So if Elaine can open that poll. Okay, so we've got a few, most people are cafes at the moment. Oh no, most people are looking to open a home business or other. That's absolutely fine. These supermarkets in there, some artisan producers. Okay, so we've got a kind of a mix of businesses, as I'd expect. A few people working in supermarkets, a few are artisan producers. Then we've got a few people working, or nearly half the group are working as home businesses, and that's fine. And we meet a lot of them. We see a lot of them, people doing making cupcakes or buns at home, or trying to make more complicated meals, and then a good few cafe restaurants. So that's the group I'm talking to this morning. So let's move on then. So first things first, I have to tell you about Guidance Note 1. Well, I don't have to, but I'm going to tell you about Guidance Note 1. So what is Guidance Note 1? Well, it's a little red book, and it looks like this. And this is for us, the Environmental Health Service, the inspectors. And the reason I'm telling you about this is because a lot of the work that I do is pinned to this guidance note. So I am not inspecting a business. So if I come into your house, if you're making cupcakes at home, I will be having regard to this guidance. Similarly, a colleague of mine may be doing the same thing in Cork, will also have regard to this guidance. So the important thing for you to know is that this guidance note exists, and it gives structure to what we do. So it's used by all environmental health officers, and it guides us through the inspection. So it guides us through risk profiling of food business. That means that we look at a business and we decide potentially how much harm can they do. We ask them questions about the type of food they're producing, the number of people they're trying to feed, where they are in the food chain. Are they supplying just the customer, or are they sending their food on to other businesses? So we gather all this information, and then we give the business a score, and then we use that score to prioritize how frequently we visit the businesses. We use this guide guides us through how to complete an inspection, the things we need to look at in the inspection, and I'll go over that in a few slides' time. The guide tells us how to classify an inspection outcome. So that means when we've finished looking around your business, been to your home, or we've looked at what you're doing, or we've been to your restaurant or your cafe and we've looked at everything, we then will tell you, usually in the follow-up letter, that your business was minor non-compliant or it was satisfactory or whatever. And then based on what conclusions we come to during the inspection, that will then tell us how to take what follow-up action to take. So guidance note 1 guides us through it. Now, the first thing to say, when we're doing an inspection, it's not personal. It's not that I've walked down the street and decided I'm in the mood for fish and chips today, so I'm going to inspect a fish and chip restaurant. I have guidance note 1 has given me a structure and it's given me a framework. So the inspection is not personal, and all food businesses are inspected. So every business, it doesn't matter whether you're a canteen in a hospital or you're making cupcakes at home, you're all subject to inspection, but not at the same frequency. And I hope you would understand that we would be looking at the canteen in the hospital much more frequently than we would somebody making cupcakes at home. And the question may arise, what is that frequency? Well, for something like a hospital restaurant, we might try to do a full inspection in there about once every 6 months. Somebody making cupcakes at home, we might try and visit them every 2 to 3 years, depending on what else is going on in the service. And as I'm going back to guidance note 1, everything depends on the risk category that your business has. So a hospital canteen category 1 every 6 months, a newsagent's or somebody making cupcakes at home is a category 5, once every 2 years, thereabouts. And why are we there to do the inspection? Well, I'm sure, and we don't have a poll to this, and we won't do that, but I'm sure that if I was to ask you to write down on a piece of paper why you thought the environmental health officer was visiting your business, you would all come up with a list that looks something like this. We're there to assess compliance with food law, and therefore to ensure that the consumer's health and rights are protected. Food law is there to protect public health, and if a business is complying with food law, there's a very good chance they're also going to be protecting public health. We're there to make sure we have the right details on file of the business. So is the business properly notified to us? And there is we now have a portal within the HSE where you can submit notification details and tell us about yourself. We are there to advise and guide around recognised best practice. And let's not forget that, so I've been doing this job in Ireland for, 18 years. And over each year, I might do, say, 180 to 200 inspections. So what's that, 3,600 inspections over the 18 years. And a lot of those are in different places. So I see a lot, and I am there. When I come into you, I will be able to tell you, I won't be able to give any specific information about other businesses, but if you've got a problem, the chances are I've seen somebody else with that problem, and I can give you some advice about how to solve that problem. I might be calling out to you in response to a complaint. It happens. Our investigation of any complaint that we receive is not in itself proof that whatever is being complained about happened. We are just there doing an impartial investigation. And we regularly get complaints. People phone us and say they ate in such and such a cafe and were sick afterwards. And we will go and do an inspection just to see if there's any possible way that that cafe could be the source of the individual's illness. But our inspection doesn't in it of itself mean that that complaint is proven. We might be there in response to the alert, and I'm sure hopefully some of you are subscribed to the FSAI's website, and you'll see there's alerts all the time, allergen alerts or food safety alerts, and some of those we have to visit a business to make sure that the message is getting through and whatever should be taken off the market is taken off the market. We might be there to take samples, chemical or bacteriological. We have a plan over the course of a year to take a number of samples, and we choose places to sample from that may be of particular interest. And we might be there to follow up on an outstanding issue. So I might have visited you before and found you had a problem. Let's say, for example, there was a problem with your fridge is not working properly. I might come back a few days later just to make sure they've been fixed. And sometimes we can't get away from the fact that sometimes we do need to take enforcement action, and that has to be progressed. Now, I am confident that most of your businesses probably won't ever be subject to an enforcement. The fact that you're on this webinar, you're here now because you want to learn and because you want to do well. And those people generally don't need to have an enforcement action taken. So hopefully you'll all agree that the list I came up there with was all straightforward. There was no huge surprises there about why I might walk through the door of your business. So we're in an online meeting. The reasons for the environmental health officer's visit are all quite straightforward. But we mustn't forget Murphy's Law. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. So, for example, it's a busy Friday night. The head chef's on holiday. The starter fridge is on the blink. The accountant is coming on Monday. Guess who's just walked through the door? Hello, I'm Philip Devenish. I'm an environmental health officer. I work for the HSE, and it's time for a routine inspection. And a number of times, me and my colleagues and I hear the phrase, "Oh, if only you'd come next week, because we're busy today because of this or because of that, but next week will be fine." So when we walk through the door, I fully realise that many of you will feel like this, particularly if your chef's on holiday, the accountant's got your records, and the starter fridge is on the blink. Now, in this next 20 minutes or so that I'm talking to you, I can't turn you into a big happy smiley face, but hopefully I can get you into a more neutral face. Okay, it happens. The inspection's got to happen. It's got to run its course. And at least you're going to know what is happening. Okay, so what's your role? Okay, so I think we have another poll here. So if Elaine could open that poll for me, thank you. Okay, so we've got most of the people on the call are kind of in a managerial or supervisory role. We've got a few food safety consultants or trainers, so I'm sure they'll have some interesting questions for me at the end. And we've got some owners of the food business. So we know roughly the spread of the audience, and the people that I'm talking to now, those of you that are on the call, you're learning what's going to happen during the course of inspection, and some of the things that I will be telling you that we look at, you as a routine in running of your day-to-day business can look at the same things. That way you won't be hit by surprises when the environmental health officer comes. I'm just going to close that window there. Okay, so what are we there to look at? So we're there to look at your management systems, your premises, your equipment, the food that you handle, your personal hygiene, how clean you are, and some other matters. So we'll just take a whistle-stop tour through these things. So management systems and HACCP. Hopefully most of you have heard of HACCP and food safety management systems. HACCP forms a part of an overall food safety management system, but what does it involve? Well, has there been a hazard analysis? Have you done a risk assessment to identify what can go wrong with the food you're preparing? Have you got controls in place? Are they appropriate? Are those controls appropriate? So you might do a hazard analysis and decide, well, food poisoning bacteria, such as Listeria, may grow on my cooked chicken in my service fridge. So that's the hazard. How am I going to control that hazard? Well, I'm going to make sure the fridge is working and that it's keeping the temperature of the food between 0 and 5 degrees. How am I going to make sure that fridge is working? What monitoring am I going to do? I'm going to monitor by taking the temperature of the fridge twice a day. And if I find that the food has gone above 5 degrees, I'm going to take some sort of necessary action. I'm going to record those records every day. So I'm going to do my monitoring and I'm going to fill out the record sheets every day. And then at the end of the week, I'm going to have a review. Our manager supervisor is taking an active interest. I am going to review what has been filled out into the records to make sure that the records are complete, they're appropriate, and that staff are reacting to potential losses of control. So that is a food safety management system in a nutshell. Now, the degree or the extent to which you might get involved in this activity very much depends on the type of food that you're doing, and the legislation allows for a bit of flexibility. So if, for example, you're only selling pre-packed product, you don't maybe need a full food safety management system, but you might need monitoring to prove you're maintaining the cold chain. If you're just making cupcakes at home, you might do a risk assessment and decide that potential hazards are allergens getting in. So if you're working at home, you might have to think about the effect of pets and children and other occupiers of the house on the food. I know in my house, if anybody does any baking, somebody will appear, one of the children will appear and stick their finger in it and just walk off with a cupcake. So if you're making cupcakes commercially at home, you need to one of the hazards you might identify will be contamination by other occupiers of the house. So that's management systems and hazard. And the full extent of that will depend on your business. We'll also be looking at your premises. We can't help but look around, and we'll be looking to make sure your premises is suitable for what you're doing. So are you trying to do a full manufacturing kitchen in a galley? Have you got enough space? Have you decided to set up a business at home and you're working in an old garage next to a clapped out Renault Clio or something like that? So is the premises suitable? Is it clean? I don't need to explain cleanliness. Is it in good repair? Is the ceiling falling down, the light fittings dangling down? Is it free from pests? And the photograph you can see here was of a warehouse I was in, and all the litter at the back behind the pallet there is a mix of chewed and gnawed cardboard and packaging and mouse droppings. So the place had a huge mouse infestation. So as well as being free from pests, is it pest proof? And that's slightly different. So pest proof is making sure that there's no gaps or holes that would allow pests into the premises or allow them to move around within it. And is it appropriately laid out? Have you got room to do a logical flow of the food, or is somebody preparing raw chicken fillets immediately next to somebody trying to wash a salad or prepare a sandwich? Or have you got, is some form of production being done in the bin store because there's no space elsewhere? Is a corridor being used as a preparation area? And I actually, just as a little anecdote, many years ago, I was inspecting a big hotel, and the kitchen had 2 doors. And what I found while I was doing the inspection is that housekeeping staff were basically using this kitchen as a shortcut. And so they'd be wheeling trolleys of rubbish or dirty linen through the production area. And if that wasn't bad enough, it also became a kind of a set down area, and you'd have members of housekeeping or other staff carrying things through, like bouquets of flowers or whatever, and then just putting them on the preparation surface in the kitchen until they needed them later on. And so we had to put a stop to that. So is your premises appropriately laid out? We'll look at your equipment, and we'll be making sure you've got the right equipment for what you want to do, and making sure that equipment is food grade. So it's not unusual for us to inspect places where they have big cooking pots, really big things, and then they'll have a splintered piece of wood from a pallet as a stirrer. So that's the wrong equipment there. Is the equipment being used appropriately? You might hear of vacuum packers, and vacuum packers are what they call complex equipment, and they should only be used for one activity, either vacuum packing raw food or vacuum packing ready to eat food. They should never be used for the same activity because of the risk of cross-contamination. Is the equipment well maintained? And clearly you can see that cooking equipment is not well maintained. Is the equipment working? Again, time for another anecdote. Many years ago, I was inspecting a sandwich bar, and it had some wonderful fridges in this sandwich bar, and none of them worked. They didn't even have a plug on the lid, but the food was being placed in this sandwich bar. So is the equipment working? Are there proper cleaning procedures? Sometimes if you have a particular piece of equipment, you need a special procedure for cleaning it. you can't, sometimes equipment, you can't just dismantle it and throw it in the dishwasher or in the sink with some hot soapy water. You actually need to run it through a cleaning program. Mincers can be very difficult to clean, and they need a good procedure and then proper storage after cleaning. We'll be looking at the food. So is the food stored appropriately? And here we have, these are all offcuts from a butcher's counter. So the guy that was running this business, he had his little butcher's counter, and all the little leftover little bits of meat, he put them in a white carrier bag, tie a knot in the bag, and just throw them in his freezer. And I was asking him, well, what is, and I pointed to one of the bags, and he couldn't even tell me what sort of meat it was, let alone how long he'd had it, where he'd got it from, and how long he was going to keep it. Is the food likely to be safe? Is there anything about the food that may render it unfit for human consumption? We'll be looking at the food to make sure it's stored at the correct temperature. Is the food labelled correctly? Can we tell what it is, where it came from, and how long it's going to be kept? Traceability information. Is the food being handled and processed safely? Or do you have a situation where there is a significant risk of cross-contamination, maybe because cooked cooled ham is being vacuum packed in the same machine that was previously used for vacuum packing fish or something like that. And then we'll look at personal hygiene. So we may not comment on it, but we'll be looking at how clean you are. Are the food handlers clean? Clean nails, not excessive jewelry. Are they wearing appropriate uniforms for the work they're doing? And we'll also might be looking at, are they taking their uniforms off if they leave the production area? Many years ago, there's a couple of incidences. On one occasion, I arrived to do an inspection. I was a little bit early. I was sitting in my car doing some paperwork, and I could see the business I was going to inspect across the road from me. And there's a couple of lads who work in that business, working underneath the bonnet of a car outside the front. They went into the production area, and I followed them straight behind. They went and immediately started working with food, and they've been wearing gloves whilst working under the bonnet of the car, and they didn't bother to change their gloves. They just went straight through to preparing the food with greasy, oily fingers. And the point of the story is that they thought that because they had gloves on, their hands were clean, and possibly they were, but they hadn't failed to realize that the gloves themselves could be a cause of cross-contamination. We might be looking for jewelry and heavy cosmetics, because if somebody is wearing a lot of perfume or a lot of aftershave, that can taint some foods. Are the staff washing their hands? The first thing that an EHO should do when they enter a kitchen is to go to the hand basin and wash their hands. That does achieve two things. Firstly, it sets an example, and secondly, it reminds us to actually check that there's a sink with hot and cold running water. Are the staff acting hygienically? And are there fitness to work procedures in place? So the fitness to work procedures is all about if somebody has diarrhea or vomiting, obviously they don't come to work, they don't handle the food, but they shouldn't come back to work until they've been free of symptoms for about 48 hours. And when they do come back, they should have a chat with the manager or supervisor to ensure that they are fit to return to work. And then they should complete a form to sign off and sign to say that they have been symptom free for at least 48 hours. All of this has nothing to do with social welfare or nothing to do with unemployment or salary. This is all purely to make sure that somebody who's carrying an infectious disease is not working in the food handling area. And then we might look at your procedures. So training, is everybody trained to a level that's appropriate to the work that they're doing? So not everybody that works in the food business has to be trained to the same level. So a number of you on the call have put yourself down as supervisors or managers. So we would hope that you are trained to a higher level so that you can supervise and manage those working underneath you. But maybe the kitchen porter or the pot boys, they don't need such a high level of training. They would need to be trained in matters such as personal hygiene and cleaning, but they wouldn't need to necessarily be trained in HACCP, whereas your head chef should. We'd be looking at, have you got cleaning procedures? So how do you clean something? what equipment do you use for cleaning? If you're sanitizing or disinfecting, what reagents are you using? Are you using them to the correct concentration? And it's something I find a few times is somebody will have a sanitizing solution and the instructions will say mix 1 part to 20 in cold water, and actually they're putting 1 part to 200 or 1 part to 1,000. 10 mils in. They might be doing 10 mils in 10 liters as opposed to 10 mils in whatever 10 mils in 200 mils or something like that. So are the cleaning procedures being followed? Are there pest control procedures? Now, pest control procedures are interesting because the picture that you've got that I've put up there is of a dead mouse in a box. The food business where I took that picture and on whom I subsequently served a closure order, they had a pest control procedure. They had a contractor came in. He came in every 6 weeks, and for whatever reason, he told them that there was no problem with pests, but clearly there was widespread evidence of pests. So clearly that contractor was not doing their job. So if you do bring in contractors to help you with anything, whether it's pest control or plumbing or a consultant, they can be a great source of help and assistance, but you do need to make sure that they're doing what you've paid them to do. And unfortunately, we do regularly find situations where pest control, food business has a contract with a pest control company, but the pest control company doesn't visit as frequently as they should. So the contract may be for 8 visits a year, and the actual visits they're only visiting each business about 3 or 4 times a year, or they're going and they're not really looking around and doing the jobs that they're supposed to do. Have you got procedures in place for traceability, especially if you're supplying on to other businesses? So all food businesses need to know three bits of information about the food they're using: what it is, where they got it from, and when they got it. And if they're supplying on to other businesses, they need a further 3 pieces of information: what it is, where they sent it, and when they sent it. And those 2 pieces of information can be linked by in-process traceability. So, and the reason for that is if I decide that there's going to be, or if you decide, the food business, if the food business decides there's a need to withdraw or recall the food, you need to know exactly where it's gone. And similarly, you may be notified that there's a withdrawal of, I don't know, a particular brand of chocolate or something, and you need to know, well, actually the chocolate I'm using did come from that manufacturer, but it's a different batch, or it didn't come from that manufacturer. You need to know, have those procedures in place. And as well as having the procedures, are they being implemented properly and being used? So I've already spoken about the difficulty with, say, a pest control regime that's not being implemented properly, but the same can be true with cleaning. You can have a wonderful cleaning plan and a wonderful set of procedures for cleaning, and nobody's paying any attention. And this all then, those of you that are on this call that are managers or supervisors, really, you may not necessarily be involved in doing the cleaning or doing the pest control work, but your job is to oversee it and make sure that whoever is responsible for doing it is doing it properly. So if I was working for you and you said to me, Philip, your job is to wash the floors at the end of each day, until you're confident that I'm doing the job properly, you would need to come in the following morning and get on your hands and knees and have a look underneath the equipment and have I washed those floors? Or is the floor clean where I'm standing? But if you look under the equipment, it's thick with grease and dirt. You need to make sure that procedures are being followed. And are they being reviewed and updated as necessary? So about once a year, food businesses should stop and think about what they're doing and say to themselves, what's changed? Have I changed my menu? If I was making buns at home, am I now trying to make buns and sausage rolls? Or if I'm running a coffee shop that was buying in pre-packed sandwiches, I was just putting on the plate and serving them, am I now trying to make my own sandwiches? Or if I was buying in cooked meat to put in the sandwiches, am I now preparing my own hams, cooking and cooling my own hams? All these things need to be considered, and because that might lead to a change in your operating systems. So we might look at a few other matters, such as claims. So I decided not to put a picture of a genuine product, but we might look at claims that are made. So this crunchy breakfast cereal, independently proven to help you look younger and slimmer. You can't make a health claim without it being a proper approved claim at the European level. And if you need more information about that, we can talk about that offline. It is quite involved. We'll look at packaging materials and make sure the food is packed in appropriate packaging, and that appropriate packaging is stored and used properly, so it's not a source of contamination. We'll look at product-specific labeling. So any of you that's going to make jam, there are specific rules about labeling of jam. If any of you are making chocolate product, there can be specific rules for labeling chocolate and so on. Again, if you're doing fish or beef or meat, there's specific labeling rules. We might look at other legislation. This is just so you know that I don't just do food. We might look at tobacco. So if you're running a cafe, we might have a look to make sure you've got no smoking signs up. If you've got a smoking area, we'll make sure that it's compliant. We might be there to look at, if you're running a shop, we might look at some of the cosmetics that you've got on sale. And so that's what we're there to look at. And hopefully you'll all agree that it's quite common sense. So the inspection's open. We've looked at all these issues. What happens next? Again, remember guidance note 1. What happens following inspection is all pinned to this guidance note. So we look at each non-compliance and we categorize it as either a class 1 non-compliance, so the risk to food safety is low, or it can be a class 2 non-compliance, which it can pose a significant risk, or a class 3, which is a grave and immediate danger. And in that we're talking about, so if you cast your mind back to the photographs, you know, the pictures of mouse activity and mice, or you might have block drains, they can all be great class 3 non-compliances. When we know each non-compliance, whether it's a 1, 2, or 3, we can then decide, we can then put simply count them, number of class 1s, number of class 2s, number of class 3s, and then the overall inspection outcome is between a grade 1 satisfactory and a grade 5 unsatisfactory series. So they're the kind of two ends of the spectrum. So what does that all mean to you? Well, if your business is satisfactory, we'll send you a letter. We have to do that now. It's our procedure. If your business is minor non-compliant, we'll also send you a letter. Just some of the things that we identified. And I seem to have lost. Oh, there we go. If your business is unsatisfactory, we'll send you a letter requiring action. We found this, we found that, we found the other. You must deal with this. Now, all of you on this call are here because you want to learn. And so that gives me confidence, and it makes me think that your businesses are going to fall in these first 3 categories. And probably most of you are going to be in this minor non-compliance. By and large, that's where most businesses are. But just to fill out the picture, we do get some significantly non-compliant businesses, and they will be given a letter with a deadline. And there could be enforcement action if it's a recurring problem. And then if there's a serious non-compliance, potentially putting the safety of the consumer at risk, then there will be enforcement action. And I hope you'd agree that that's kind of appropriate. But as I said, most of you your businesses will probably be in those first 3 categories. You're here, you want to learn, you're being proactive about your business is being compliant. So just to finish up, I'm going to give you some do's and don'ts, and then I think there might be some questions. So this is what you should do. Remember that complying with food law is your responsibility. Okay. We will inspect and give you a list of some work that maybe needs doing, but at the first stage, it is your job to know if your business is compliant or not. We do occasionally, somebody will inspect businesses and it's in a poor condition, and the operator of the business will say to us, oh, well, I wasn't going to do anything until we got your letter. That's kind of the wrong way around. Do be honest, open and honest. A lot of times, some food businesses will try and deceive us, and we very quickly can work it out. And I'll just tell you a very quick, funny story. I was doing an inspection. I asked to see the operator's records, and she legged it out the business I was inspecting, which I thought was strange. She said she'd gone to get them, but she ran out the front door. So I stood in the entrance, and 10 minutes later, she came back with a newspaper under her arm. And inside the newspaper was clearly a bundle. She didn't expect to see me. I asked her what was going on, made her jump. She dropped what was in her hands, and all her food safety records went all over the pavement. I asked her what was going on, and she said that she'd taken all her temperature records into the local pub, going back to class GM1. A pub will be a category 5. It was drink only, and she was trying to show the bar staff how to fill out the records. Obviously, she was lying, and she'd been caught out with trying to falsify her records. So do be open and honest, because we will work it out. Take your own notes. There may be a period of weeks between the inspection and you getting a letter, and if you've taken your own notes, you'll have a better understanding when you get that letter, or a better recollection, and you can have done a lot of work before you get the letter. Do ask questions. We're not going to take it personally. If you ask questions, it's good. It shows that you're doing what you're doing today. You're being proactive and trying to get involved. And do make every effort to understand while the EHO is on site. Don't wait for the letter, because when the letter comes, it can be, and we do our best to make them as reader friendly as possible, but there is some technicalities in them, and it won't. We're discouraged from giving you a line by line or blow by blow account. We might say your premises was not sufficiently clean because, and then give you 3 examples, and then just say you have to keep your premises clean. We won't list each and every corner of your business. Do engage with us. We want to hear from you. We want you to be in touch with us. We don't want to be taking enforcements. I'd rather spend 2 or 3 days talking to you about your business and getting you on the right track than be on the other end of it and you keep your mouth shut, and then I find serious non-compliances and I'm taking enforcement, because that's an awful lot of paperwork on my end as well. So do try and see the inspection as a two-way process, and do try to make the most of having someone with relevant expertise on site for free. We're not your consultants. We can't be your consultants, but we do see a lot during the course of our normal inspection, so we can give you advice and tips. And here are some don'ts. Do not assume that you don't have to do anything until you get the list. I've already said we get people say to us they're not going to do anything until they get the list. That's not how it works. You are responsible for running your business. Don't think of the EHO as your consultant. I know there are some consultants on the call, and I'm sure they'd be more than happy to assist you for a fee, and then they can give you as much time and attention as you need. We can't do that, and we shouldn't do that, because it becomes a conflict. If I'm spend 3 weeks really writing your food safety management system for you, how on earth can I then take an enforcement if whatever becomes your food safety management system is not satisfactory? Don't attempt to deliberately obstruct or frustrate the inspection. We do have powers of entry, and there was a case a couple of years ago, I think, or even quite recently, where the FSAI have been involved. So if we have difficulty with gaining access to a premises, we can get the FSAI involved, and then it can all get very hot and heavy. Don't try to hide things, because we will sniff things out eventually. And don't assume that we, the environmental health officer, has all the answers to everything. But a lot of times we don't, but we can go and look it up or go and find it. Just to say on that last point, behind me, so when I'm stood in your house or doing my inspection, or in your cafe or in your supermarket, behind me is what they call a network of support units. And so if I have a particular question, so if you want to put such and such information on your label and I'm not sure, I can go to my support unit and get an opinion from people with more expertise than me. And do not ignore the inspection or the subsequent report, because we will be back. And don't be defensive or take it personally. As hopefully you've seen through the start of this inspection, I'm not just coming into you to inspect because I feel like you need an inspection. You're on a list, and I'm working through a list. And everybody is on that list. Everybody who runs a food business, is on that list. And don't see it as a confrontational nitpicking exercise. We will usually find something, and most businesses are in that minor non-compliance. If you're busy running a business, dealing with customers and clients and tax people and insurance people and suppliers and all the rest of it. So I know things are you've got a lot of balls in the air, and some things sometimes will slip, and we will find it. But we do realize that it's part of a bigger picture, but we will help to, or try to help, get you back on track. And that is the end of my presentation. So as I said right at the start, you can submit online notifications through the ehonline.hse.ie, and you can find more about the environmental health service from the HSE website. That's it. So I'm going to put that back there and end my presentation.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Philip. I can see that we're getting lots and lots of questions. So I'm going to call out a couple of the questions. Like we've got some really, really interesting ones. And then we'll stop with the Q&A session around 10 to. So the first question I have here, and just thanks so much, Philip. That was so, so interesting. And I can see that everybody has stayed online and has been engaging. So that's always good. But the first question I have here is about an inspection. So this is a startup business, and they ask the question, when is the best time to invite an EHO into their premises, or how does that work for the very first time when you're setting up a business?
Okay, so that's a great question to start with, because there's no real wrong answer to that. So what you can do is make contact with your local environmental health officer as soon as possible, and you can, even if you haven't got a premises, if you've got a general idea, I'm going to be in, I don't know, Affluent Health Centre, or I'm going to be in Cork City, make contact with the local environmental health officer and say, this is what I want to do, and we can talk to you about it before you even sign contracts. So let's say, for example, you decided, right, I'm going to open up a sushi manufacturer from my daughter's bedroom. Well, we would straight away say, well, if you're going to do that, you need to do this, 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 and it's basically, you'll immediately see that it's completely not feasible, and so you'll change your plans. Whereas the further down the track you get with your project, you can contact us and say, this is what I want to do, and we'll give you some advice. We might ask you to send in a sketch plan so that we can comment on it. We might ask you to send in information around your food safety management system. Maybe not the full spiel, but what are you basing your food safety management system on? Are you going to buy the safe catering pack or something else? So there's no, it's make contact. So the answer to the question is make contact as soon as possible, and we will draw from you the information that we need to assist you. And we'll get to a point where you're saying, well, I'm going to be ready to open next week. And you might say to us, can you come in on Thursday? And I'm going to say, well, no, I'm busy on Thursday, but I'm quite confident that what you've shown me so far is going to be fine. So just don't hide from us, because we'll find you anyway. But just make contact as soon as possible, and start a good working relationship that way.
Fantastic, Philip. And I suppose I'm aware that there may be businesses that haven't contacted you at that point. You know, there might be someone who's set up, even if they shouldn't be technically.
Yeah,
What should they do? Should they reach out? Is that the best thing?
absolutely. So the link I put there on the last slide, ehonline.hse.ie, you can go onto that and register your business. So the thing to say is, all food businesses must notify. Now, depending on the business, you might have to notify to the Sea Fishery Protection Authority or the local authority vets. If you're not sure, ask these guys in the FSAI, and they'll tell you who your competent authority is. But if you're a bakery or a coffee shop or a newsagent or something like that, then you will be HSE. Go onto that portal, create an account on the portal, submit your notification. It'll pop up on an EHO's database, and then we'll make contact with you and start walking with you through the process. But again, make contact as soon as possible.
Fantastic. I actually have a question here about the portal itself. The person asks, what notifications can we process on ehonline.ie?
All of them, all food business notifications, and if you're running a tanning salon, we can do that for you as well. But yeah, all food businesses that are relevant to the agency are able to be processed. I mean, if you're really stuck, if you're a business that, I can't believe that there will be any businesses, but if you're not an online business, we can sort you out with a paper form. But the best thing is to go with this portal, and supply the information.
Fantastic. We have a question about the outcome of inspections. So this person wants to know if the outcome of an inspection is available to the public or to competitors or consumers. Can anybody access it?
No, so the law requires that all information gained on foot of an inspection is only used for the purpose of that inspection. So no, your dirty linen is kept secret. The only situation, I suppose, where it could arise is if you are a supplier, your customers might ask for your inspection history as part of their supplier approval process, but that's completely up to you. I would even go so far if you're operating a business in a shared setting, whether it's one of these hour kitchens or if you're renting kitchen space in a commercial building, my inspection is with you. My relationship is with you. So if I find that there's significant non-compliances with the building that you're in, I won't contact your landlord. I will write to you, and then you have to contact your landlord to say this needs fixing or that needs fixing. Everything is kept confidential.
Fantastic. I have a question about food safety certs. So the person says I have food safety certs from the UK. Are these comparable or acceptable to work here?
So we'd answer that question in two ways. Firstly, well, maybe more than two. Let me think about it. So the first thing we would check during the course of an inspection is, do you know what you're doing? So if you can't produce a training certificate, but you have lots of information, then maybe getting a formal certificate might be not such a big deal. On the other hand, if you have a certificate, but you clearly absolutely don't understand what it's doing, then obviously the questions have to be asked about how you managed to get a certificate. But at the same time, we would look to you to train again. So yes, a certificate from the UK, as long as it's relatively recent, will be fine, as long as you are applying what you're learning. Now, and what you can do also is, if you know where you got that certificate from, and hopefully you will do, you could probably get a copy of the syllabus from the course, so that we can then have a look and see what it was you were trained in. But the proof is very much in the proof of the pudding is in the eating. I think that's the phrase. You know, if you're trained and you've got your certificate and you're behaving you're doing everything you need to do during the course of inspection, then happy days. If you're trained, you've got a certificate, and you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing during the inspection, you're still going to be a bother, even though you've got that certificate. Does that answer that question? I hope so.
Yeah, I think that answers it perfectly. We have a question here about halal shops. So I'm not sure if this is very specific or not, Philip,
It is very
but
specific. Go
but the question is about the frequency of visiting halal shops.
on. That would depend on their risk category. So let's say, for the sake of argument, they're a category 4 butcher, which it probably would be. They would be subject to the same inspection frequency as a non-halal butcher, or a kosher butcher, or whatever. They'd all be classed as butchers, and now the actual halal slaughter would probably come under the supervision of the vets or Department of Agriculture, I would think, not us in HSC. But if it's just a butcher's shop in itself, they would be subject to the same inspection frequency. So round about once a year, once every 18 months, depending on what we find during the course of an inspection.
Perfect. Thank you, Philip. We're getting into the more specific ones now. Um, so this question, I work from home and have a food stall. I have been approached to supply a cafe. Do I need to inform my EHO of this change, and does this change my business category?
Um, yes, it probably would. They don't. The questioner doesn't say what type of food it is, but let's assume it's some sort of cake. Um, it would do. So if a business that supplies another business scores another 10 points in the risk categorization. So it might bump you up from, say, a category 4 to a category 3, or a category 5 to a category 4, which might increase or should increase the frequency of inspection. But let's face it, if you're supplying another business, the potential for harm is increased. But what you should do is, yes, notify your local EHO, because it is a change in the nature and extent of your business. And because we would then have questions about, do you have capacity? And I mean, do you have actual space? It's one thing making 300 cupcakes to go on your stall. So you make them on a Saturday, you put them on make them on a Friday, you put them on the stall and sell them on a Saturday, and then you go back to your day job Monday to Thursday the next week. That's a different thing to supplying 300 cupcakes a day to Elaine Gibson coffee shop down the road. So yeah, do tie in with your local EHO, and they'll talk to you about it.
Perfect. Um, The next question, and I'm going to take two more questions, and then we'll probably finish up. But the next question was about shelf life. So this person is looking to ask where they would find guidance on best before dates.
Okay. Well, it depends again. It depends on the nature of the product. So if it's a say a high risk product, say you're making sandwiches or salads or I don't know cooked food meats, you can or you're making pestos or hummus. That seems to be the kind of the flavor of the month, pun intended there. If you're making those you can go to. There are a number of labs that will perform shelf life testing for you. Just one thing to watch with shelf life. Okay, you might send your product off for a shelf life, and it might come back and say, "Great, this pesto will last for 3 weeks," but a lot of that's under laboratory conditions. So you produce the pesto, it's transported in a controlled vehicle to a lab where it's put into a highly calibrated and regularly tested fridge, and it's tested, blah blah blah. That's not truly reflective of real world conditions, where you might produce your pesto, put it on the shop shelf in a shop. Someone like me goes in, buys it, puts it in the bag, puts it in the boot of my car where it will spend maybe an hour, then goes home, puts it into my domestic fridge, which may be running at 9 degrees and blah, blah. So if you've got a shelf life, it's great, but you do need to consider real world implications. And also, just because something has a very long shelf life, it doesn't mean that's not the same as saying that product will stay sterile through that shelf life. So if something happens in your production facility and an organism like Listeria gets into the pesto, sorry, this is getting very technical now, but if you really need to talk to your local EHO about it, but if Listeria gets into your pesto, that Listeria is going to grow unless there's something about the pesto that will stop it growing, such as it's very acidic. So the Listeria will grow to potentially harmful levels until that shelf life. So there's two kind of things there. Firstly, yes, go to a lab, get a shelf life test. But the second thing is you need to know why your product is achieving that shelf life, and that's very technical and it's well beyond the scope of what we're talking about today. So I would talk to the local EHO, but have those two questions in your mind: what is the shelf life as defined by laboratory, and how are you achieving that shelf life? I think that'll do with that one.
Perfect. So I suppose the final question really that I would have would be about your key take home message. Philip, what would you like everybody to come away with today?
I think the key take home and what I've tried to emphasize is like, do make contact with the local EHO. Uh, Now, obviously, I don't want you to be phoning me every day to tell me your fridge temperatures, but just do keep in touch. And if you've got a question, you can either go to the advice line in the FSAI or come to us, and we will try and answer the question before it becomes a problem. Don't don't put your head in the sand and think, well, I'm not going to think about this particular issue. And then, because one day an environmental health officer is going to walk through your door, they're going to find whatever it is that's the issue, and they're going to have to deal with it. So yeah, come and talk to us, and we want to keep you in those, even on the inspection outcomes. We want to keep you in that satisfactory or minor non-compliant field, and the way to do that is to kind of engage with us, and we'll engage with you. I think that's the take home.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Philip. That was very helpful, I'm sure, to everybody on the call. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'm conscious that we got through a lot of questions, but there are some that we haven't got through yet. So please do, you can send your question into info@fsai.ie and we will get back to you there. Thank you to the audience for joining us this morning. A survey will pop up after the call. If you could fill it out, that would be fantastic. And if you would like notifications for our events, you can subscribe at www.fsai.ie/subscribe. So thanks again for joining us, and thank you, Philip, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.